Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, Sharon Sews, a channel all about sewing. In today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make a half apron with double ruffles and heart applique pockets. I used a Valentine theme fabric, but you could use any fabric. Don't want to do the applique yourself on the pockets? Use a purchased applique or leave it off. Another great feature of this apron is the super long ties that you can tie in the front or the back. I have added timestamps in the description so you can go to specific sections. Let's get started. To start your apron, gather all of the supplies that you will need. I used quilting cotton that was approximately 42 inches wide. The apron body cut 42 inches by 18 inches long. Your upper and lower ruffles, you're going to cut 2 each, 42 inches by 7 inches long. For your pockets, you're going to cut 4 pieces of fabric, 8 inches by 8 inches. The waistband, cut 26 inches by 5 inches long. For the ties, cut 40 inches by 5 inches long. And then you're going to want some scraps of fabric for those applique hearts that go in the pocket. The large heart, there's going to be 2 of them. You want to scrap about 6 by 6, and for the smaller heart, you're going to want to scrap about 5 by 5. You will need coordinating thread to sew the apron, and then you will want a contrasting thread to applique the hearts. You will also need fusible backed web. I used heat and bond, a ruler, paper scissors, fabric scissors, a pencil, an iron and ironing board, and of course your sewing machine. I do have a PDF that you can download of the 2 hearts that you will use for your applique, and optional you may want 2 small little buttons that you can put on your pocket. Download and print the heart file. Again, that link is in the description below. Then you're going to trace 2 large hearts and 2 small hearts. Make sure the fusible web paper backing has the bumpy side down. Place it over the hearts and trace again 2 large hearts and 2 small hearts. And be sure to leave about a 1/2 inch between the hearts, and then you're going to rough cut the hearts out. Place your fabric scraps for the heart appliques wrong side down on your pressing surface. Then you will take those hearts that you cut out in the previous step, again rough cutting, and placing them bumpy side down over the fabric. You're going to want to make sure that they're cut out enough that it does not go past the fabric, because otherwise you're going to have a mess on your ironing surface. Once the applique is bumpy side down to the wrong side of the fabric, use your iron and just give it some heat to adhere. You're basically melting that little bit of glue and adhering it to the fabric. This is the instructions for heat and bond. If you're using a different type of fusible web, please follow your manufacturer's instructions. Once you have all 4 of them fused in place, you're going to cut the hearts out. Once you have all 4 hearts cut out, it's time to fuse them to the pocket. Take 2 of your pocket pieces and place them right side up on your ironing surface. Peel the paper backing off of the large heart, place it in the center of the pocket, just where it looks good to you. Go ahead and peel the paper backing off of the small heart and place it on the lower edge of the large heart. Once you like the look of it, you're going to just make sure that it's not in the 1/2 inch seam allowance, so you're not stitching it into the pocket seam. Once you're happy with the placement of the hearts, you're going to make a tiny mark on the edge of the large heart where the small heart meets it. I'm using a removable fabric marker. Just use something that is not going to show when you applique. What we're doing is making a mark where we're going to start and stop the large heart applique so that we can avoid a thread bump underneath the small heart, because it's going to get appliqued over the larger heart. Once you're happy, go ahead and fuse that big heart in place. Do that for both of the pockets, and then we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to applique. Go ahead and put a contrasting thread in your sewing machine and let's applique. Before you applique your heart to the pocket, I would highly recommend that you do a practice run first. On your practice piece, set your zigzag stitch for satin stitch. Set the width and the length of the zigzag for the look that you want. You want to make sure that the right swing of the needle goes to the outside of the applique and it goes into the pocket fabric, and the left swing of the needle is inside going onto the applique. That is what is attaching that to the pocket. When you're going around the curves, go ahead and slow down. Just leave the needle in the fabric and make a tiny little turn. And when you're starting appliquing this heart to the pocket, you're going to start at the upper mark on the straight edge, the upper mark that you made in the previous step. You're going to satin stitch all the way around this heart, and when you get to that other marking at the bottom of the heart, you're going to stop. Remember, we don't want to applique in that space because we don't want a thread bump under the small purple heart. Repeat the step to add the large heart to the second pocket. Then you're going to take the pocket back to your ironing surface and you're going to fuse the small purple heart in place using the marking lines that you did in the previous step. Once you have the small hearts fused in place, bring it back to the sewing machine and you're going to applique those in place using the same technique that you just did for the larger heart. Change the thread in your sewing machine to the thread that you're going to use to sew the apron. On a flat work surface, place two pocket pieces together. You'll place one of the plain pockets right sides together with one that is appliqued. Pin all four edges and leave a 3-inch opening at the bottom of the pocket. And then you're going to take it to the sewing machine and you're going to stitch using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Be sure to back stitch at that opening and pivot at the corners. That 3-inch opening that you're leaving, that is how you're going to turn the pocket right side out. Bring the pocket to a flat work surface and go ahead and trim the seam allowances. At each corner, trim off a little triangle piece of fabric. That will just eliminate a little bit of bulk in the corners. And then go ahead and turn the pocket right side out. Use your fingers to push out the fabric in those corners. And if you're having trouble getting a nice sharp corner, go ahead and use a tool. Use a tool such as a chopstick or a pencil or the end of a paintbrush. You could even use your scissors, although I wouldn't really recommend that. What your goal is to not poke through the corner because then you have to turn it back to the wrong side and restitch those corners. That opening at the bottom where you turned it, go ahead and turn those edges in, and we're going to take this to the ironing board and press everything flat. This is optional, but you can take it to the sewing machine and stitch 1/2 inch from the upper edge as I've shown there. Next, you're going to take that little 1/2 inch and fold it over. You're going to fold it over and you're going to press it in place. That's just giving a little bit of dimension to the pocket when we stitch it to the apron. I wanted to add a little bit of bling to my pocket, so at the very center of the upper edge, I sewed on a sparkly little heart button. That's optional, you don't have to. Designate one long edge of the apron body as the upper edge. Now my fabric has a directional print, so it's very easy for me to determine which is the upper edge. Then on the other 3 sides, the 2 short sides and the bottom long edge, you're going to press in 1/4 inch, and then you're going to press in again 1/4 inch. So what you're doing is you're making a double 1/2 inch hem, and your raw edge is going to be completely encased. Bring the apron to your sewing machine and go ahead and stitch that hem in place along all 3 edges. Now it's time to create the ruffles that will go on the bottom edge of the apron. On a flat work surface, place the upper ruffle strips right sides together along one short end. Pin it in place. Do the same thing for the lower ruffle. We're going to take it to the sewing machine and stitch that seam. At the sewing machine, you're going to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance and stitch the seam that you just pinned together. Remember to backstitch at the front and the end of the seam so that your stitches are locked. If you want to, you can use coordinating thread that matches your ruffles and do the seam on the upper ruffle and the lower ruffle. Take both ruffles to the ironing board and press that seam open. Once the seam is pressed open, you are going to do that double 1/4 inch hem, just like what you did on the apron body. You will press up 1/4 inch, and then you will press up 1/4 inch again. Do it on all 4 edges, the 2 long edges and the 2 short edges. You'll do it on both ruffles, the upper ruffle and the lower ruffle. And once everything is pressed in place, take it to the sewing machine and stitch it in place. The next step is to create the gathering stitches to create the ruffle. So 1 inch from the top edge, you're going to stitch with long stitches, your basting stitches, all the way along the top edge of the ruffle. Then you're going to come back and you're going to stitch a second row of stitches 3/4 inches from the top edge. So those rows of stitches will be 1/4 inch apart. You're going to do that on both the upper ruffle and the lower ruffle. At the beginning and the end of these long rows of stitches, be sure you leave a long length of thread, maybe 6 to 8 inches. You're going to need that to grab a hold of when you do pull the gathers up, and you'll see that in the next step. On a flat work surface, place the apron body and the lower ruffle right sides up. Fold the apron body in half because you want to mark the center of it. I've gone ahead and marked the center with pins already. And then you're going to want to mark the center of your ruffle also. Using a ruler or a tape measure, measure 5 inches up from the bottom of the apron. You will mark the fabric at that 5 inches. I'm using a chalk marker. You just want something that's not going to be permanent. Go ahead and do enough marks along that bottom edge that you're going to be able to align the lower ruffle easily. Find the center of the bottom ruffle and match it up with the center of the apron. Place the wrong side of the ruffle against the right side of the apron with the top edge of the ruffle along that mark that you made. Pin in place at the center. At the edge of the ruffle, take those long thread tails that you left when you put in the basting stitches, grab the bottom threads, the 2 of them, and start pulling up very gently to create your gathers. Now you do want to do it slowly, and you want to be gentle because you don't want to break the thread. If you break the thread, then you need to go back and redo the basting stitches. This is how you're creating your ruffles. Just gently pull, and with the other hand, just gently kind of push the ruffles to the side. You can see that I have already done ruffles on the one side. You will take the edge of your ruffle, the side edge, and you're going to pin it in place, matching the side edge of the apron. Continue to adjust the gathers and remember to align the top edge of the ruffle along that line that you marked. Once you're happy with the way they are adjusted, pin them in place. And then once you do one half, go ahead and do the other half until the entire lower edge ruffle is pinned in place. Now it's time to add the upper ruffle. Go ahead and match the center of the apron and the upper ruffle. And then you're going to measure from the top edge of the apron down 9 inches and make a mark. Continue measuring and marking across the entire width of the apron. You're creating that line that you're going to align the upper edge of the ruffle to. Match the centers of the ruffle and the apron just like you did with the lower ruffle, and adjust those gathers in the very same way. Once you have the gathers adjusted the way you want, pin everything in place. Bring your apron to the sewing machine. You're now going to use a regular stitch length and stitch right in between those 2 rows of gathering stitches that you used to create the ruffle. Go slowly. You might have to manipulate the ruffle as you sew. Be sure to remove those pins as you sew, and just continue sewing all the way, connecting the ruffle to the apron. Don't forget to backstitch at the beginning and the end. You'll do the very same thing for the bottom ruffle. Be sure to flip that top ruffle out of the way so it doesn't accidentally get stitched down. Remember to move the pins as you stitch, and you might have to manipulate those ruffles just a little bit as you're stitching. Go slowly, take your time, and be sure to backstitch at the front and the end. Now it's time to add the pockets to the apron. Place your apron right side up on a flat work surface. Measure 3 inches down from the top of the apron and 5.5 inches from the edge of the apron. You can see I marked it with pins there, and place your pocket along those lines. Now you're going to move out that top ruffle out of the way because the pocket's going to kind of tuck down under there. Go ahead, once you have it in place, pin all the edges. To do the same thing with the other pocket on the other side. Measure 3 inches down from the top, 5.5 inches over from the side, and pin your pocket in place. Once both of them are pinned in place, you're going to take it to the sewing machine and stitch. When you stitch the pocket to the apron, be sure to backstitch at the top of that apron. That's an area that will have some stress on it if you use that pocket, so you want to make sure that it does not come undone. Go ahead and stitch about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. You can go as far in as 1/4 inch if that's easier for you, and stitch along all 3 edges of the pocket. When you get to that lower edge that's tucked underneath the ruffle, just pull that ruffle out of the way while you stitch so you don't accidentally stitch it to the pocket. Be sure to remove your pins when you're stitching. Once you finish one pocket, do the same thing for the second pocket. Step is to add the waistband and the ties. Place your waistband on a flat work surface right side up, and then take one short edge of one tie and match it to one short edge of the waistband and pin it in place. Take the second tie and match the short edges of the other side of the waistband and pin it in place. Then take it to your sewing machine and stitch that in a 1/2 inch seam allowance and press it open, very similar as to what you did when you created the ruffles. To gather the upper edge of the apron to fit to the waistband, you're going to use the same technique that you used to gather the ruffles. At your sewing machine, use a long basting stitch and stitch starting 1/2 inch from the top edge. Go all the way along the top edge. Stitch a second row of basting stitches 1/4 inch away from the first one, all the way along. Remember to leave those long thread tails that you'll use to pull up for the gathering. Place your apron right side up on a flat work surface. Mark the centers of the waistband and the apron. Then you're going to take your waistband and place it right sides together, matching up the center to the apron, and pin it together. At this point, I find it easier to flip it over so that the gathering side is on top. So go ahead and straighten everything out so you can work with it easily. Take one side edge of your apron and match it to the seam where you attach the waistband to the tie, and go ahead and pin it in place. Now grab hold of the 2 bottom long thread tails that you left when you did the basting stitches, and you're going to gently pull up the apron so that it matches the waistband. So you're just going to gently pull and gently use your fingers to kind of move the gathers along. And once you have it so that it's the same length, pin it in place. Then move to the other side of the apron and do the same thing. Match the side of the apron to the seam that attaches the waistband and tie together, and pull up the gathering stitches so that they match the waistband. Bring the apron to your sewing machine. Using a regular stitch length and a 1/2 inch seam allowance, go ahead and attach the apron body to the waistband. You're pretty much just stitching right over that basting stitch that you had used to create the gathering stitches. Remember to remove your pins, and remember to back stitch at the beginning and the end. At your ironing board or pressing surface, lay the apron down, wrong side facing up, and just gently press that seam you just sewed up towards the waistband. And you can see that I'm not going back and forth with the iron. I'm actually lifting it up slightly and pressing it down. Once you have that done, you're simply going to continue on. You're going to fold up 1/2 inch on each tie on 2 long ends and the short end. Fold up 1/2 inch and press it in place. Fold over 1/2 inch and press until you have both of the ties, all 3 edges of the ties pressed in, and the upper edge of the waistband. If you want to add a label to showcase your work, now's the time to add it. Go ahead and fold that waistband in half, and on the wrong side, that will be against your body, place the label where you want it, and then you're just going to go to the sewing machine and stitch it in place. We're going to do it now so the stitching doesn't show on the right side of the apron. With your apron on the press surface facing wrong side up, fold the waistband over. The edge of the waistband, that bottom edge there, will be folded over to match the stitch line, and that's the stitching line where the apron connects to the waistband. Go ahead and pin that in place. Go along the entire length of the waistband, matching that edge to the stitch line, pin it in place, and then lightly press. You'll want to have as many pins as you need because we are going to take it to the sewing machine and stitch it in place. I like to use a lot of pins just to help control it because we are going to stitch it from the right side. Once the waistband is folded over and pinned in place, you are going to take those ties and simply fold them in half and iron them. We will stitch around all the edges of the tie at the sewing machine. If you want to have pins to keep it in place, you can certainly add pins. I have found if you're using a quilting cotton and you press it in place, you probably do not need pins, but that's up to you. So go ahead and press the right tie and the left tie, and then we'll take it to the sewing machine and stitch everything, and you will be done. At the sewing machine, place your apron right side up. That means your pins are going to be on the wrong side. So you're going to want to sew slowly and carefully so that you do not stitch over those pins. You're going to stitch about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. We're just edge stitching everything in place. I like to stitch from the right side on the waistband with the pins on the opposite side because then I can control how the stitching looks on the right side, and I'm not as concerned if I'm a little bit off on the other side, meaning I might end up with a 1/4 inch seam on the other side. So just take it slow and continue edge stitching all along the waistband. Now as you're stitching this, one thing to be aware of, because of those double ruffles on the bottom of the apron, there's a little bit of weight to this. So it might want to pull a little bit. Again, another reason why you just want to stitch slowly. And then once you get to the end of the waistband, you're going to continue to edge stitch along the tie ends. So you'll go all the way along the tie end, the short end of the tie end, all the way along the upper edge of the tie end, the upper edge of the waistband, continuing until you are back where you started. And at that point, you're going to back stitch to lock your stitches, remove it from your sewing machine, put it on, twirl around, and admire your beautiful new apron.